But if we miscalculate by even 1 meter?
These are engineering problems, my friends. And we are engineers. Shall we begin?
Hey guys, Pete here. It's time to talk about the 8th episode of For All Mankind's 3rd season. No big surprise that there's a crisis on Mars, but this episode seemed more concerned with adding layers to the characters they've worked pretty hard to make unlikable, and continue to add layers to the ones we like while putting them in difficult situations. On the brighter side, Nick is reunited with PJ, Alexei survives the landslide, and Ed and Danny finally have that heart-to-heart. We are getting into the final stretch, and I'll be breaking the whole thing down, and that will, of course, contain spoilers. With that out of the way, let's get into it. At Happy Valley Base, they experience the effects of the landslide. They figure out pretty quickly that it's not a Mars quake, and when they can't make contact with Helios base, Danielle tells Will and Roland that they're going to have to go out in the rover to investigate. She tells them that whatever personal issues they have going on, they need to squash them, and nothing like a crisis to bring people back together. It looks like that's mostly been smoothed over. We watch as Alexei emerges from the dust. It turns out that the landslide buried him, but he survived. He's not able to reach anyone on the radio, and he looks like he may have sustained some injury as we watch him vomit inside his suit. Nearby, he discovers Nick's body. His face shield was shattered, so he didn't last long. And the first thing I thought about here was Danny's culpability for what happened in the accident. Nick was the only one that was there, and knew that Danny decided not to act to vent the pressure. Back on Earth, we get a scene with Ellen and Pam having their talk. She shows her the letter and they talk about how things ended. Pam admits that she lied and gave her up because she thought that one day she could make a real difference for people like them. And she's been disappointed since she's been sworn in. All she's seen her do is make compromise after compromise. Ellen delivers a reasonable response, saying sometimes you have to settle for what's possible. And they do both make their points before they get interrupted because Ellen has to leave because of the situation on Mars. There's a lot of history and you can feel the emotion between these two, who are in an almost absurd situation given the fact that Ellen is the president of the United States. The big takeaway, though, is that it feels like there's seeds planted here for Ellen to do something with her power that might redeem her in the love of her life's eyes. Or maybe not. She could decide to hold on to that power, and this would make that feel all the more tragic. At Helios, they decide to send all the engineers over to NASA to coordinate a rescue attempt. Karen stays behind because she says someone needs to visit the families. This feels like a callback to her role in season 1, all those NASA wives getting together, and it's in contrast for the person that Karen has become. But her ex-husband and her daughter are in the middle of this crisis, and if anybody understands what those families are going through, it's her. Dev looks shook, and he vows to do everything in his power to rescue Ed, and he says it in the way that seems sincere. Alexei finds Louisa, and she explains that Isabel didn't make it. Danny talks to Phoenix in orbit and finds out that they made contact with HAB 2, which has a busted antenna that's making communications difficult, and they can't raise Ed and Danny, who are trapped in HAB 1. There we find Danny patching up Ed's injury. They're in the airlock of HAB 1, and they're buried. There's an emergency beacon transmitting, and if they're not too deep, then there is a chance they could be dug out. At NASA, they assess the variety of problems they're facing. The M-SAM is inoperable, so everyone on the surface is stuck there, and they know there wouldn't be much air or much time for the people trapped in HAB 1. We see Danny start to lose hope as they realize they have maybe 6 hours of breathable air. Danielle and her team arrive at HAB 2, and eventually Alexei and Louisa make it back. They're able to work out where they were, and Alexei and Kelly go out with ground-penetrating radar to search for HAB 1. They have a talk while they search where she brings up her fears about losing her father. He tries to make her feel better by telling her about his father. And you could see that this has turned into a real relationship. We also learn that he has a bad headache that he can't shake after the landslide, and they do eventually pick up the beacon signal. Jimmy and Amber Stevens are watching the news coverage on TV. Jimmy has a moment where he's really disturbed by the fact that they are advertising erectile dysfunction pills in the commercial break. And then Karen arrives to sit with them and help her keep busy by cooking dinner. As they're eating, she breaks down crying. And this does a lot to establish the character some because we haven't really got to know her yet. Eventually, they will get a call telling them that they located the hab, and that brings some temporary relief. Although Jimmy is still acting weird because he thinks this is all some kind of cover-up for something more nefarious. At NASA, they realize Hab 1 is buried 20 meters deep. They know that they don't have that long to dig, though, because they're going to run out of air. And it's kind of funny when you think about it that they had all of these different sides spread out, all competing for everything, and they still found a way to bring it back to NASA Mission Command, which gives it that same feeling that we've had over the last couple of seasons. Margot notices Deb isn't in the conference room and decides to go look for him, and Aleda asks Bill if the Soviets ever say anything about Margot. He doesn't really know why she's asking, but it's just to remind us of that storyline that they didn't really touch on in this episode. When she finds Deb, they have a conversation, telling the same story he told Karen back in episode 2. She brings up her relationship with her dad, which we remember learning about in season 1, and then things turn a little bit when he tells her that his father worked at Kirkland and lost his job after Apollo 23 exploded on the pad. He spent the rest of his life looking for work but never found anything meaningful, and he never really recovered. He passed away before Deb graduated college, and this is the part of the story he usually leaves out because he says people like to hear about success in America. They don't like to hear about failure. They share a moment where there's mutual respect. She tells him that she thinks that his father would be proud of him, just as her estranged father was for her in his own way. She goes back in and asks if he'll join them, and he says in a minute and stays there to think. When he returns, he brings up a dangerous plan that could work. And you see everyone sort of discredit it first, and then realize they don't really have many other options. They'll have to enter a lava tube and blow a hole below the hab so the debris can flow down like grain from a hopper. After it drains, they'll be able to access it from above, and it's a pretty good solution as long as they don't blow up the hab in the process. Everyone has concerns, and Dev brings up the perfect line, probably one of the best lines in the episode, to calm them down, saying, "These are engineering problems, my friends, and we are engineers." And this is a turn for the character, or at least the way we look at him, and it kind of emphasizes what this story is all about. Humanity has its problems, individuals have their problems, but in moments of crisis, they can put that stuff aside and they can work together and they can do amazing things. Ellen returns to the White House. Larry kind of gets upset that she didn't tell him where she was going, and he freaks out some whenever she says she went to see Pam. It's pretty easy for her to turn that around because, well, all the stuff he's been doing. They argue, and when the vice president shows up, she asks him to give them the room, so she's kind of shutting him out here. Danny and Ed have no idea that the rescue's underway, and they're arguing as well. And this time he brings up Shane with a pretty surgical, "You're not teaching me to ride a bike." Of course, I don't think he knows how much this will get to Ed, but it turns out to be the right thing to really get him worked up. He provokes him to the point of hitting him, and he opens his wound, and they're able to use a anti-clotting agent to stop the bleeding. It all looks pretty painful, and I think you can see Danny showing some remorse as he's stopping the bleeding. What's interesting about this time with Ed and Danny is that initially Danny's the one that gives up. He can't see a reason to go on, and later they're going to flip this upside down, and they're both being affected by the weight of the situation. There's a really good chance they're going to die, and they think that they're at the end of their lives. Ed has his regrets. Danny's been living with his shame. So I really appreciated how they sort of played these two characters off each other. And it kind of fits with this overall idea of making these characters a little more human. And where that really pays off is when Karen tries to talk to Jimmy, and he brings up that he knows about the affair between her and Danny. She's taken off guard, but then she eventually comes clean and even listens when he tells her that she used him. I suppose this is part of what's been missing from this story, the complicated reasons for how it affected him. Jimmy says Danny always tried to please everyone, and we see this from the other side when he's talking to Ed and they think they're about to die. I don't know if it's enough to bring us around on Danny, especially after what he did in the last episode, and we're still in the aftermath of that. People are dying. But seeing what he's done through Jimmy's perspective, who went a completely different way in his trauma, adds another dimension. Alexei collapses and vomits when they get back to the hab. The doctor suspects that he's suffering from a subdural hematoma. They'll have to drill a hole in his skull to relieve the pressure, and they're going to need a blood transfusion, and it turns out that Kelly is a match. And that'll be important later because they're going to be looking at her blood. Will and Roland work together, they get their job done, they place the explosives, we see them triple check everything, and then get ready to run before they detonate the charge. Back in Hab 1, the oxygen levels are low. Danny says he'll help Ed to get into the suits, and this time, Ed's the one that says it doesn't matter. He's the one who's giving up. He expresses regret for fighting with Kelly the last time they talked. She was angry, and we saw that he dismissed her. And this reminds him of the last time he talked to Shane when he yelled at him and told him to be a man. This is something we wanted to see Ed get to, I think, because he's been doing the same thing with Danny and it's been causing problems. And Danny apologizes for what he said, taking responsibility for all the trouble he got into with Shane. I don't think that was ever clear before, and he was happy to let everyone think that it was Shane. He says that he dragged him into all of it and let him take the heat. What kills him is that he forgave him every time. Part of that was that he was afraid of Ed, he was unhappy at home, so he really cared about this friendship, and now he feels responsible for what happened. Basically, if Shane had never met him, then he wouldn't have died. And the really sad part is, from that moment, back when they were 12 or however old they were, back when we saw him over at the house in that moment he had with Karen, he thought that if he lived the life Shane could have had, maybe it would make up for it. And now he feels like he failed, that he's ruined his life. He's going to leave his daughter behind, just like his mom and dad left him and his brother. And we see that Ed is overcome with emotion and just tries to comfort him, saying it's okay, it's okay. He's about to confess that he's the one who slept with Karen as they are about to pass out and eventually die when we hear the explosion and then they're saved. Amber and Karen get the call that they made it. Jimmy finds out. This is a really great scene. This show is so good at putting together those emotional moments. Everyone working together, everyone solving the problem, somebody celebrating that, and you're right there with them, and they hit it again one more time. A little while later, Ed wakes up. Apparently, he'll be okay. Alexei did not make it, though. Ed learns about the others. Kelly is shattered over losing Alexei, and he comforts her. And they made it through this crisis, but there are still a lot of problems. Primarily, how do they get back to Phoenix, and then how do they get back to Earth? And we're going to have to wait to the next episode to find out. Everyone from Helios and Roscosmos leaves NASA. Dev and Margot share a look, and there's a shot of her looking at the empty room and smiling. This is that shot that comes after the celebration. Just a short look helps you remember all of the triumphs they had, why Margot is such a crucial character to everything that happened at NASA. And considering her situation, the fact that she's compromised, this felt like a bad omen to me. Sort of that one last shot they show of a character before they kill him off. I mean, I don't think they're going to kill Margot off here. I think she's going to end up in prison or something along those lines. But especially the second time I watched this, it felt like it was setting something up. Back on Mars, the two remaining Soviets talk. The commander asks, what do we do about the Baldwin girl? because they figured out that she's pregnant. This probably happened during the blood transfusion, and they don't think that she knows yet. And they don't say a lot here, but it does feel like it's supposed to be ominous. They say they have to tell Moscow first, and say that she could be a threat to the entire crew. I'm not sure I understand why they think that, but it gives us something to think about in between episodes because this one ends right there. Some great character development in this episode, and we also lost quite a few of them. Nick and Isabel may have been minor, but it's still sad to see them go. Think about what that experience must be like so far away from home. I think the population of Mars was 13, so 3 deaths means they shed 20% of that in a 24-hour period. Not to mention losing the HAB and the supplies and the MSAM. Danny is 100% responsible for this. And while they did a good job of injecting some humanity under the surface of his character's situation, I'm not sure how his commander or any of the other astronauts would be able to overlook that. Kelly lost the father of her future child, and everyone's survival is on the line because he was wasted at the console. It'll be interesting to see if he's able to fly under the radar because of Nick's death. There's a lot up in the air, which is a nice way to set up a fantastic ending. I thought it was absolutely promising to see them go back and reconnect to so many things that happened to these characters over the past decades. I can't wait to see where things go from here, and I think that's a good place to leave things. Let me know in the comments what you think about this episode and where we'll go next. Please like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.